Welcome back to this channel. In today's video, we are continuing on in a multi-part series that I'm considering kind of the masterclass in gait deviations following a neurologic injury. In each video in this series, we've gone over a different gait deviation that impairs your ability to walk efficiently and safely and with adequate speed to be able to do the things that you need to be able to do to get through your normal day. And in today's video, we are gonna cover a gait deviation that is extremely common, or maybe not necessarily a gait deviation, but a structural deviation that causes difficulty walking, and that is knee hyperextension, or what we call knee recurvatum. In this video, you're gonna learn what the root causes are that could be causing your knee to go into knee hyperextension or recurvatum, and solutions, some of which are extremely easy fixes and don't involve like neural rewiring like at all, as well as exercises to break up this problem of that knee hyperextending in the standing phase of walking to improve your overall walking speed, efficiency, safety, and improve your walking confidence. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara, I'm a neurologic physical therapist. On this channel, we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to take full ownership of your rehab and your overall health. Now, before we dive into today's video, are you someone who feels like you're just not where you want to be with your overall recovery? Well, if so, you would not be alone. And many, many times, the reason we plateau in our neurologic recovery is because going to physical therapy 1, maybe 2 times a week just isn't enough. More than that, some of you guys get huge interruptions in your care during the reauthorization process or getting back on a therapist's schedule. So for those of you that are new, we do have a membership program that addresses that exact problem and allows you to get the repetitions, daily repetitions in that are necessary to rewire your brain. With our gold membership program, you get access to the entire vault of exercises that I use with my patients that I see in person, but they're all in a software system where you can filter through to the exact exercises that address the root cause of some of your movement problems. You can pull them over into your own home exercise program, and then every time you log in, your very concise list of exercises is right there waiting for you so that you can easily incorporate them into your home exercise routine, allowing you to get those daily repetitions in. But also as a gold member, you get access to our monthly Ask Me Anything sessions where you can get your specific questions answered, and our monthly webinars where we cover everything that goes into optimizing your neurologic recovery. If you want to learn more about our programs, or to sign up, or to schedule a discovery call to speak to someone in person to know whether or not our programs are right for you, you can visit rehab-hq.com, and I look forward to seeing you on the inside. But now let's go ahead and dive into addressing this very common problem of knee recurvatum or knee hyperextension. So first, let's go into the root causes, because I promise you guys, I know you guys hear me talk about these things a lot, but it is so important so that when we get to the solutions that we're going to talk about today, you understand what your root cause is so that you're not addressing or you're not overwhelmed by all of the solutions. There's probably 1 or 2 things that you can do in the solutions we're going to go over today, and you don't necessarily need to do all of them. And by understanding the root cause of knee recurvatum, it'll help you to filter to the exact solution to address your specific problem. Okay? So what can cause your knee to hyperextend in the standing phase of walking? Well, the most obvious one is weakness. So when we lock our knee out, our bones just kind of rest on top of each other, right? The structure can't bend backwards. It can only bend in one direction. So if you just lock it out, We call that kind of like a screw home mechanism where the thigh bone and the lower leg bone, they kind of lock into each other. So it makes it a lot safer to walk. And many times people learn that very early on in the stroke recovery process because it allows you to get up and walk and move around and not fall. What else can cause this that's kind of in the same category as weakness is not having adequate eccentric control. Again, it's kind of in the same category weakness, but when we get to the solutions, it is important to understand the difference and to make sure that you do the exercises safely. If you have this inability to use your muscles eccentrically, you want to be very cautious with some of the exercises. What is eccentric control? Eccentric control is being able to keep your muscle, in this case, your quadricep muscle, keep it contracted as it lengthens. So why is this important? Because there is a moment in time when your knee needs to unlock or bend in the walking cycle, but it still needs to maintain a contraction, okay? If you can't do that, then it is much safer to just keep that knee locked out. So those are the two that kind of fall under like weakness in a specific muscle. Then there's just the inability to coordinate your hip muscles with your knee muscles. And this is extremely common. For some of you, the only way that you can kind of keep yourself vertical, which requires your glute muscles and your quadricep muscles to time together. Hip extension is the glute muscles, quadricep activation are the quad muscles that keep the knee straight. They have to be able to coordinate together. And some of you, it's really just a timing issue. Like you can either straighten your knee out and you collapse here, or when you try and squeeze your glutes, your knee collapses, but you can't do both at the same time. I like to call that coordinated hip and knee extension. Some of you just can't coordinate the two together. That's just a timing issue, and it just requires practice, and we'll go into that when we get to the exercises. And then for others of you, it's spasticity. So what is spasticity? Spasticity is an involuntary contraction that occurs when you have damage to an area of your brain or your spinal cord that is involved in motor function or movement. Spasticity and dystonia are not the same thing. And I get this question quite a bit, and I get emails on this quite a bit. Dystonia and spasticity are not the same thing. These videos are not appropriate for someone that has dystonia. And in fact, it could make your dystonia worse if you are thinking about some of the things that I'm going over, or you're trying to incorporate some of the solutions we're going over. So very, very important. Dystonia and spasticity are not the same thing. But when it comes to spasticity, if you have spasticity in your plantar flexors, which is very common, that's involuntary contraction down there. When your foot is on the ground and your foot points, it's going to throw your knee backwards because your foot can't point down. Okay, so spasticity in those plantar flexors, very important to remember, especially when we get to some of the solutions that I'm going to go over today, or spasticity in the quadricep muscles. And that one's pretty obvious. That involuntary contraction in your quadricep muscles is going to throw that knee backwards. And the downside of that, especially when it comes to knee recurvatum, is once that spasticity kicks in, and this is also important for when we get to the solutions, once that spasticity kicks in, it is very, very hard to break out of that or get that muscle to relax. Now, I've said this in other videos, and this is just my opinion. I think spasticity, was probably created by our creator, it probably had good intentions, because when you initially had your stroke and you have no movement, because a motor area of the brain has been damaged, it would make sense to me that the system that's involved, which is like the stretch reflex, which I've also talked about in a lot of videos, the brain would kind of try and hack that system a little bit to create this involuntary contraction. Now, for some of you, that's not going to make any sense because I've made whole videos on spasticity and talked about the stretch reflex and how that contributes to spasticity. But long story short, there was probably an evolutionary or adaptive reason for it initially, because if you have no movement or you have no strength, better to have an involuntary contraction than have no contraction at all. And in fact, some of you have already know you use spasticity and you've kind of learned how to trigger a spasm to keep yourself standing. This is very, very common with people that have spinal cord injuries, and they will actually tell me that they're using their spasticity to stand up, like they're very familiar with what I just said. But anyway, spasticity in your quadricep muscles, throwing that knee backwards, creates a problem. That knee hyperextension makes walking very, very jerky, not smooth, not efficient, and slows you down. Okay? And then, as I've mentioned in several of the videos in this series, an abnormal synergy pattern. In this case, it would be an extensor synergy pattern. What is a synergy pattern? It's when muscles link up abnormally. These are hardwired patterns in our brains that were given to us before we were born or when our brain was developing. And there's an extensor pattern and a flexor pattern. And if you think about infants, it makes perfect sense. These patterns we're born with them because infants kind of learn how to use these patterns, or they learn how to move by using these patterns before they really even are aware or can think or motor plan at all. And you've all seen this. When a baby flexes up, they roll from their back to their stomach. If they want to get back on their back, what do? They just extend everything. They're using these, what we call primitive patterns. Some scientists believe that this is just one of the stages in the recovery process after a neurologic injury. An extensor synergy pattern is extremely common after a stroke, and many, many times this is where a lot of people kind of stall out in their recovery or in the stages of recovery. So why would that be the case? When you're standing on that leg, it would make sense that your brain would want to pull in this primitive pattern to make sure that your knee doesn't buckle and you don't fall. But over time, in some cases, it just becomes a habit. So we're going to go through some exercises to start breaking up that pattern today. But just know that an extensor synergy pattern can be another reason why you might hyperextend your knee when you are walking. And now, before we dive into exercises, I want to talk about one final reason that you could be hyperextending your knee that has almost an immediate fix, and that is bracing. So first, let's just talk about these two braces. They are the most common culprits of this knee hyperextension. And the reason we're starting with bracing as far as the solutions is because it is really the quickest fix. So let's start with this one. We call this a floor reaction AFO. This is probably the most common one that you will see or that some of you have, but basically any brace that has a rigid structure on the front of the shin, okay, it can be plastic because some orthotists will make something that looks like this, but anything that has rigid structure and a fixed ankle, meaning the ankle component does not bend, it's not articulated, there's no articulation here, so it's fixed, okay? Anything like that will throw your knee into hyperextension because when your foot hits the ground, this right here pushes that knee backwards. Huge problem. Now, why do so many people get this brace? Because it's a very, very good brace if someone's knee is buckling. And very early on, many of you, your knee was buckling. But then what happens is you develop a little bit of tone, and then this brace becomes a problem because maybe now you do have a little bit of ability to straighten that knee out, and no one updates your brace. And what typically happens right after you start to get a little bit of tone back in that leg is you do start to develop a little bit of spasticity, or you go into one of those stages of a synergy pattern, which some believe it is a stage in the recovery process. And so your knee is extending at this point, and all this shell does is push your knee backwards. So if you have this type of brace, you don't want to come out of it right away because you have learned how to walk with this, but it does mean that it's probably a good time to meet again with your orthotist and your physical therapist to see if they can change this brace. But one solution that works sometimes, but I'll say it's not great, is if you take a wedge and you put it underneath the heel of the brace, it tips this forward. So it's no longer vertical. It allows your shin to kind of translate forward just a little bit when you are in the standing phase of walking. Sometimes that works, but if you have a lot of spasticity, that's not going to work. You're going to point your foot anyway. And actually, what I've seen people do is their leg just comes off of this because you just go into recurvatum. So this is good, but it's not really going to solve the issue. You really do need a different brace altogether. So meet with your physical therapist again and your orthotist and discuss possible options if you are someone where that knee hyperextension is interfering with your ability to walk. And then this is the other one. Oh, the beloved, what we call like a PLS or a posterior leaf spring brace. This one is kind of like a higher end one because it's carbon, but a lot of you guys love this because it's extremely low profile. Like you can almost not see it when I have it here, right? Because it's so thin, and you guys love that because you can wear a lot of shoes. When your leg is in it from the front, you can't even really see it. So, but huge problem, especially if you're out of that flaccid early stage of walking and now you're starting to get some tone. Okay, either spasticity in your ankle muscles, that plantar flexion, or spasticity in your quadricep muscles, or you have an extensor synergy pattern. This brace is so flimsy that it bends. So you're just going to push right through it. Your knee's just going to push back. Okay? The other thing that happens with this that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with knee recurvatum, but it is another problem because so many of you love this brace and you have this brace, again, because it's so low profile, is that you're pistoning in and out. So unless you have like a high top on and you tie those laces really tight, what happens is your leg just slides up and down in here, and then your foot's pointed in, inside the brace, and it makes walking very hard, and you use up a lot of energy walking that way. So this has a very specific use, and that is for someone that has a true drop foot due to some sort of a peripheral nerve injury. That's just my opinion. That's probably the only use case for this brace. So what is the appropriate brace? If you have spasticity or you have an extensor synergy pattern, the best and most appropriate brace that most of you just hate is one of those plastic articulated, meaning the ankle bends, brace with a plantar flexion stop. I've probably talked about this in every video to this point, and it's because so many of you absolutely are trying to get out of your braces as quickly as possible, and you're wondering why you're having difficulty walking, and that is the reason. Okay, so an articulated brace, I've talked about it in several of the videos up to this point. All the videos in this series to this point will be listed in the description below, but you need a plantar flexion stop because what a plantar flexion stop does is it pushes your upper leg bone forward. Okay, it's usually a little screw or a little piece of plastic in the back of the brace, and it doesn't allow your knee to pop back. So it pushes it forward and it doesn't allow your knee to pop back. That's the best fix for knee hyperextension. But then I want to go over one other brace that's called a Swedish knee cage. Now, don't get this one. This is the one that I use in clinic, but I will tell you that the black ones like this are made out of plastic and they break. You want a Swedish knee cage that is white. That is a metal one and it does not break. I bought this one and I've been using it for a while, but more than one patient that has bought this one has told me that it breaks. So I think the amount I use it, it's not really a problem. But if you're going to be using it every day, I would not go with the plastic version of this. But this is not a hinged knee brace, which I've seen some people have come to see me that also have bought a hinged knee brace. This is not a hinged knee brace. This brace is fixed in a little bit of bend. And this bar in the back is a rigid bar. So it literally stops your knee from going backwards, okay? So it goes here, and this bar in the back stops your knee from going backwards. This Swedish knee cage, I would say, is second to a good AFO, a good ankle foot orthosis, okay? And the reason is because they're bulky. When you stand up, a lot of times they slide up and down. There's a lot of downsides to it. If you're a female, it has to either go under your pants in case you have to go to the bathroom. There's a lot of problems with it, but it's a good tool for those of you that want to work on like higher level activities maybe, and that's when your knee recurvatum really kicks in. So you want to work on some higher level balance activities. This might be an appropriate brace. Now, who is this brace not appropriate for? Any of you where you lack eccentric control. Why is that? Because this knee, as soon as you stand on it, it unlocks your knee. And so it would be very dangerous unless you restored some of that eccentric control, which we're going to go through today, to go right into a brace like this. So this is another case where if this is something you're interested in, I would definitely work with a physical therapist first. Those are the bracing solutions that will immediately fix that knee from going into that hyperextension. Okay, but now let's get into the exercises. What are the best exercises to stop your knee from going into hyperextension? First is stretching. I cannot stress it enough. The stiffer your muscles are around, especially your quads and your plantar flexors in this case, the easier it's going to be for those involuntary spastic contractions to occur. So in the circumduction video, I went into the stretches for the quadricep muscle and the plantar flexor muscles. I'm not going to go into that stretch again in this video because I've already gone through those two stretches in this series. But if you are someone that has any involuntary contraction, absolutely you want to be stretching, holding those stretches for at least a minute, 2 to 3 times a day. Quadricep stretches, stretching out the quadricep muscles, and gastroc or plantar flexors, stretching out those muscles, holding them for a minute, 2 to 3 times a day. All right, now let's get into what I'm going to call like the motor control exercises. And these exercises are going to improve eccentric and concentric quads, and we're going to work eccentric and concentric glutes with the knee bent, and then we're going to do some exercises where we kind of put those two together. So the first one we're going to do, and some of you guys have seen this exercise before, this is the involved leg. You want to put a band, the other end of this band, just put it in a door, okay? And you want to be in a lunge position. So this is your not involved leg. This is your involved leg. This is your not involved leg. You want to get in a lunge position, let your knee bend, and then push it straight without locking it out. Okay, we're working that concentric control. And then just make sure you're not shifting forwards and backwards. So I see that sometimes. So you want to keep your hip forward and just let that knee go back. Let it bend. Try and keep your heel down on this one. I do get this question quite a bit. And then back. Let that knee come forward and back. Eccentric and concentric control of those knee muscles. Okay? Again, when you push it back, you don't want to let it lock out. Forward, and then just a little bit back. And then for this next exercise, Probably a little bit harder for some of you, but you're gonna step forward, do like a little lunge, and step back. Forward, you're gonna do a little knee bend. Try and keep your back heel down, don't let it come up, okay? Keep that back heel down, and step back. Forward, bend. Now, when you go back, you wanna be going back and straightening your leg out at the same time. That's really important. Many of you, remember I told you it's about coordinating that hip and knee together. Many of you, sometimes you do this and then you kind of lurch yourself back. That's one potential sign that you do just lack this coordination between your glute muscles, which I talked about earlier, and your knee muscles. So make sure that you're straightening that leg out and you're pushing back at the same time, okay? Then once you get good at that, then you want to try and do that off of a step, okay? Make sure you're doing this in a safe manner, okay? And you're gonna step down and back up. Probably like a 2-inch step is gonna be adequate for you guys. This is a 4-inch step, but it's stepping down. That's that concentric and then that eccentric. So this is a way to advance that previous exercise. Much, much harder and much more risky. So make sure you use good judgment. Don't try this on a step unless you've gotten really good at the lunges. Now we're gonna address those glute muscles. Remember I told you sometimes it's a combination of just not being able to coordinate the glute muscles and the knee muscles together. So what you're gonna do is, for some of you, you're gonna shift onto your involved leg and keep this heel down and just keep that toe down on the ground. Put a weight in your uninvolved arm, and then you're going to drop that weight down towards your knee and come back up without letting this knee hyperextend. Okay, so lots of things going on here. Do this without a weight first, but you're gonna hinge at your hip, keep that knee soft, reach it down for your opposite knee, and back up, okay? So toe down, but most of your weight's on this leg, down and back up, down and back up. Very, very important component that a lot of people neglect with that knee hyperextension, coordinating that hip and that knee together, down and back up. All right, now we're gonna get a little bit more advanced and we're gonna do a curtsy squat. Now, this is incorporating a lot of things. One is it's incorporating a weight shift. So for some of you guys, it's just habit to lock that knee out. So by just working on activities where you're forcing yourself to stand on this leg, that's kind of what this crossover step does. It just forces more weight onto this leg. And doing that little curtsy squat, you're just kind of encouraging your body to stand on that leg and coordinating that hip and that knee. Make sure you can do the lunge exercise first, because this crossing midline component is going to make this exercise a lot harder. Okay, so you're crossing midline, doing a little bit of a squat, and then standing back up, cross midline, little bend, and back up, cross, little bend, and back up. And then the final exercise is crouch walking. I've shown this in probably all the videos, so if you're already doing this, good, you're on the right track, because I think I've shown it in every video so far in this series. But basically, so one thing I had mentioned earlier is that sometimes that spasticity, once it kicks in, that muscle is just not gonna relax. So the way that we address this is you just work on walking in a crouched position, overly emphasizing that knee bend. One thing it's gonna do is it's gonna get you out of the habit of relying on locking that knee out to keep your stability. But also, if you start with your knee bent and your leg never has an opportunity to go into that spastic pattern, then a lot of times it just makes it easier to keep the knee unlocked during that phase, that standing phase of the walking cycle. And then you're just going to walk. Okay, if you can do that without your, with your hands behind your back, then next try it without your hands behind your back and crouch, walk. Okay, but that is it for this video. Now, this is just one exercise in each little category. Don't forget, with our membership program, you get access to the entire vault of over 400 exercises, where once you get good at this exercise, there's a progression of exercises that you are able to move on to. And again, it's all in the software system, so it's really easy to filter through, take exercises off your program that you're getting good at, add exercises on, and really just allow you to never stop progressing until you reach your goals. To learn more about our membership programs and to sign up or to speak to someone, you can schedule a discovery call to see which program is right for you. All of that can be done at rehab-hq.com. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.